Alright, so taking a little bit of a break from archaeology, we're gonna take a look at Riani's ranking WoW Cataclysm melee DPS from best to worst. Okay, so this is starting with the best ones. I don't know that much about melee DPS, but I mean, I played Cataclysm back in the days, quite hardcore as well. Well, not quite hardcore, heroic raids. So I'll try to chime in with my opinions on this while we go through. Let me just double check the quality. Why is it auto on 480, bro? That is not okay. So there we go, let's play this.
With tank and healer rankings out of the way, it's time to find out which class can pump the biggest numbers. In this video, we'll go over each...
Wait.
It's time to find out which class can pump the biggest numbers.
Okay, which class do we think will be pumping the biggest numbers? Just starting this off, I think DKs are really good. He's doing melee DPS, so it's not counting hunters, even though they're physical, they're not melee. So we have, yeah, I think I would be shocked if Unholy DK is not number 1. I would be surprised, I would be very surprised. Arms DK, Unholy DK, yeah, I would be really surprised if Unholy DK is not number 1, and it depends on if he's using phase 1 here or Cataclysm as a whole. Unholy DK is surprisingly insane through pretty much the entirety, to be fair. Now, that being said, if we go back to OG Cataclysm, Paragon used 10 Feral Druids, DPS, on their Nefarian kill in Blackwing Descent. I don't think we'll be seeing that this time around, don't think they're that insane, but doing some target dummy DPS and some heroic dungeon DPS on my Feral in the beta, they are really good, but they would not be topping, and they would be quite far down the list, to be fair. The way we're playing now is way different. So Unholy DK, really good. I think maybe Fury Warrior, not Fury, Arms. Like Warrior DPS should also be there. Once again, I think he's going to clarify. He's probably going to clarify if it's based on the entirety of the expansion or only phase 1.
In this video, we'll go over each of the melee DPS classes and compare which performs the best. Let me add a little bit of a disclaimer here. This will give you an overview of the entire expansion, and the rankings may or may not be true for every single phase. Some classes will be strong at the start and then fall off, while others scale more heavily with gear from later phases.
Feel free to quote me if I end up being wrong here, but I do think Enhancement Shamans is one of those that starts off being great. Not great, but being really good and then maybe falls off. Even though they're pretty good to have in a raiding environment, at least one of them. But yeah, when I was doing target dummy DPS, for me, on melee DPS, Enhancement was number 4. On consistent single target DPS. Maybe I'm doing every other rotation wrong, I have no idea, but it just felt pretty good. You don't really have those big hits, but you attack really fast.
I'll also look to place more emphasis on the raw numbers than the buffs and the utility that they bring to the raid.
Okay.
Almost every spec will have a spot in a 25-man roster, but out of those specs, which will be the one you'll see towards the top of the rankings? And with
Unholy
that,
DK.
Let's start off with the class that I played on original release, namely the Frost Death Knight. The Frost DK finds himself in Cataclysm in a very similar situation as they did in Wrath of the Lich King. They'll be very strong with limited gear, but fall off compared to other classes as we reach full best in slot. While you'll find nothing new and crazy in the Frost DK toolkit, the way you play will change quite a bit from the Wrath version. The cooldown of Howling Blast has been removed and now only costs 1 Frost Rune. Additionally, with the new mastery system increasing frost damage, the way we use Howling Blast also changes significantly. There'll be several playstyles that will be viable, like 200 Frost, as well as Haste and Crit spec with more focus on Obliterate. But most likely we will see the Master Frost spec that will prioritize Mastery and Haste, while putting heavy emphasis on Howling Blast to come out on top. Especially during speedruns, where there's a lot of added value on being able to pump higher numbers on trash. Frost Death Knights bring Brittle Bones and Icy Talons to the raid, which is not a bad addition, but it will most likely be brought up by other classes as Survival Hunters, Arms Warriors, and Combat Rogues.
Okay, so Brittle Bones, your strength is increased by 4% and your Frost Fever chills increasing their damage taken by 4%. Hunting Party improved for... Yeah, so improved icy talents gives you and everyone else attack speed, but hunting party from hunters also brings that now. So you have a lot more classes bringing a lot more utility. That's one of the bigger changes we have in Cataclysm. Way more classes brings those things. Like you would want to have a Frost DK in the past, or an Enhancement Shaman, or both, but at least one of them in the past. But now you have way more classes bringing more stuff. Same thing goes for Feral Druid and Leader of the Pack. And I think there's something with Warrior Rampage, which, I mean, Warrior's coming up here, so he's probably going to talk about that.
Will most likely see high representation in the raids. But in a 10-man setting, a Frost Death Knight will definitely pull its weight in the buff department. Frost in Cataclysm will be very fun to play and will perform well in the early game.
You know, speaking from my own standpoint here, I hope that Frost is better than Unholy, but I think I pretty much know already that Unholy is better. I just like the Frost playstyle, okay? I'm very biased, I like the Frost playstyle, but I mean, I'm not playing a DK anyway. I'm a Warlock, no, I'm a Boomkin main, and then a Warlock. Like, my guild wanted a Boomkin over a Warlock, so I'm Boomkin maining, then a Warlock, and my DK is my third character, which I'll just be tanking dungeons on, and probably doing DPS in raids. Unless, nah, I'm not gonna tank a raid, man. But DK is really fun to play, and tank DKs are insane in Cataclysm, for those who don't know.
They'll have niche use cases and can perform extremely well on AoE. But their poor scaling and limited utility mean they lose out on a top rank while still earning a spot in the A tier.
Okay.
Moving on to the big brother, the Unholy Death Knight. If you've been playing Frost in Wrath of the Lich King, then surely you've been eating the dust of this cooldown management beast of a spec. Every single patch, the Unholy Death Knight has been one of the top dogs, with the exception of ICC once everyone got full best in slot.
Yeah.
While some things about the Unholy Death Knight will change, the fact that you'll be pumping the meters.
That sword is so nice though.
While leaving the Frost Brethren in the dust remains the same. To me, the Unholy Death Knight really comes into its own in Cataclysm when it comes to class fantasy, leaning into the disease.
Also, am I crazy here, or is that the chair from Mist of Pandaria? Like, we don't get that toy in Cata, do we? I'm so sure that I got this one in Mists, unless I'm completely misremembering things. But I do have that toy in retail, and I'm pretty sure it came from Mist, but then again, what do I know? It's a really nice chair, though.
And pet management playstyle. The Unholy Death Knight gets Dark Transformation, which allows them to transform their pet into a proper aberration after getting 5 stacks of Shadow Infusion, which you get by casting Death Coils. They also get a spender for their Frost and Unholy runes in the form of Festering Strike, which
I know that I'm pausing a lot at the beginning here, by the way, but he just said spender, and that makes me want to just comment on this. A lot of classes, pretty much all the classes, but a lot of the classes are going to a builder spender now. Paladins as well, builder spender. For both DPS and healer, just builder spender. A lot of classes, pretty much all of them, do want to go to a builder spender. You have a resource you're building, then you have one you're spending. So you have mana, then you have holy power. For a rogue, you have combo points, feral combo points. A lot of classes get those combo points now, or builder spender type of mechanic. That's basically Cataclysm, the way it worked. They just try to force everyone over to a builder spender. Think about the hunters as well with their focus and stuff.
Extends the duration of your dots, meaning you'll pretty much never have to cast Icy Touch and Plague Strike unless you have to swap targets while Outbreak is on cooldown. Unholy Frenzy gets swapped from the Blood Tree to the Unholy Tree.
And the Warlocks with their soul shards.
It now gives a 20% haste increase. Most people will opt to cast it on themselves, but do keep in mind that it does not stack with heroism and that your Gargoyle is GCD capped in this expansion. So you'll need to be a bit more mindful about your cooldown usage than to just pop everything at once.
Okay.
Utility-wise, Unholy does not bring a whole lot to the table. The magic buff increase can be brought by several classes, and the anti-magical zone is not very useful outside of 10-man scenarios. But frankly, when you pump as hard as the Unholy DK does in Cataclysm, you don't need utility, which is why they earned their spot in the S tier.
Yeah.
Working our way through the played classes brings us to the Retribution Paladin. All Paladin specs in Cataclysm.
I will say, having played a Ret Paladin myself on the beta, they pump. The Ret Paladin burst is unmatched in my experience so far. Like, most classes double their DPS during the burst. As a Ret Paladin, I more than tripled it, because you have abilities and cooldowns that increases your damage done, makes it so if you generate one holy power, you generate all holy power, and then you can just spam use abilities. So you just end up Templaring Verdict 24/7, and you have abilities increasing your holy damage, physical DPS, all DPS. It's just crazy how many cooldowns they can pop, and by lining things up, you can pop them all at the same time, combining that with, for example, a trinket proc and a trinket on use. So you fish for the trinket proc before popping the cooldown, so you have one trinket with, let's just say, 1700 strength, then you pop another one with 2000 strength, and then you burst with your cooldowns during plus 3700 strength. That's crazy. And then you could fish for enchant procs as well, for example. It's just nuts how much DPS they can do during their burst. Plus they have good sustain.
And their rotation became centered around the builder/spender rotation of Holy Power
There we go.
instead of the cooldown-based rotation of Wrath. If you enjoy the somewhat mindless rotation of Wrath, then Cataclysm Ret may not be for you. In this expansion, it'll be much more about managing uptime of your Inquisition buff, building Holy Power, using procs, and aligning your cooldowns during burst windows. Paladin gets some wonderful quality of life additions in Cataclysm, like Long Arm of the Law, giving you a 45% movement speed increase when you use Judgment at range, and will be able to pull their weight in the interrupt department with the addition of Rebuke. The single target rotation is a lot more dynamic and will require you to make decisions about what to press next based on procs and buff durations, but the multi-target rotation, in my opinion, is clearly missing some oomph. You simply just used your single target rotation, as you have no AoE Holy Power spender. If there's more than one target, you swap to Seal of Righteousness, and if there's more than 4 targets, you use Divine Storm instead of Crusader Strike. You still only cast Consecration if pretty much every single other rotational spell is on cooldown. The Ret Paladin is much more consistent than in Wrath, and doesn't need a Shadowmourne equivalent to do competitive damage. Realistically, Ret Paladins will be the class brought for the 3% damage increase raid buff, while still providing kings or might, making having one in a 25-man team absolutely essential, and a strong competitor for a DPS spot in a 10-man group.
Yeah.
This is why the Ret Paladin earns her spot in the A tier.
Yeah, that's what I thought, and above
Next
the DK.
On the list, we have the Arms Warrior. The Arms Warrior in previous expansions have been relegated to the role of a PvP spec. But while it's still the go-to PvP spec in Cataclysm, it really comes into its own as a PvE spec as well. The Arms Warrior just...
I'm really curious if he'll be putting Arms Warrior into S tier, because personally I think would I? He's basing this on the entire expansion, right? Arms Warriors, they are pretty crazy. Once you get full bis and everything, they are pretty crazy, and they do bring a lot of stuff now to the raid. I don't know what it's called. I think I hinted towards it earlier in the video when I had the name at the top of my head. But they have something they bring that gives like a damage bonus to the group or something.
Says no when it comes to boss armor. With a new spell called Colossus Smash, your rotation becomes all about making the most out of the windows where the debuff is active.
Yeah.
Properly using Inner Rage, Deadly Calm, and Stance Dancing correctly will set you apart from other warriors. You have strong cleave with sweeping strikes, strong AoE with blade storm and rend spreading, and the single target speaks for itself. The only problem really with the Arms Warrior is that they don't bring any special buffs outside of the 4% physical damage buff that is also brought by Frosty Case and Combat Rogues. All other buffs will realistically be brought by your Blood DK tank and Feral Druid off tank. But in a 10-man scenario, without an optimized comp, the Arms Warrior absolutely does bring a lot to the table. But here's the thing. Who need buffs when you have damage? And that's why they earned their spot in the S tier.
Above Unholy?
I will however make the disclaimer here that for both tier 11 and 12, they will be more of an A tier pick.
Above
but really
Unholy?
Starts to go crazy on the DPS after they get their Biz weapon in Firelands. But overall, they're an incredibly strong pick. That brings us on to the Fury Warrior.
Yeah, that's going to be a trash tier.
How the mighty have fallen.
Yeah, no.
Now, I think the internet is being a bit harsh on the Fury Warrior. It's ultimately a very similar state to previous expansions, where it'll be utter garbage towards the beginning of the expansion, but scale extremely well with gear, and once we get to Dragon Soul, you should not be surprised if you get out DPS'd on a lot of fights by a Fury Warrior. The Mastery system was nerfed and then buffed again during the expansion, and seeing as we'll be playing on the 4.3.4 tuning, we should see Fury Warrior as a slightly stronger pick than it was the first time around. That being said, the reason why you'll probably see no Fury Warriors and why everyone is placing them as a bottom pick for this expansion simply comes down to the alternative being so much better. In the early phases,
that's why people place them low as well, because they would put them into the don't pick this tier or don't play tier, because why play Fury if it's vastly underperforming when Arms is overperforming? It's kind of like a rogue. If Subtlety is S tier, which it isn't by the way, but if Subtlety is S tier, why would you play anything else if that's like D tier? If Assassination is D tier while Subtlety is S tier, then suddenly the D tier becomes like fucking F tier, or even worse, it's just like, it's a don't play tier, right? When you have another one that is just vastly overperforming and way better.
It won't even be close. And even in full biz, the Arms Warrior will pull ahead slightly of the Fury Warrior, so why would you ever play one?
Exactly.
All that, combined with having less utility than the Arms Warrior,
so you put them in B
a
tier.
Spot in the D tier.
Oh,
that brings
nice.
us to the Enhancement Shaman. The reign of the spell.
I would also put them all the way down there, by the way, but just, once again, that's a don't play this tier, or don't pick this, because you have something way better. In terms of raw DPS, it's not like Arms is doing 20,000, while Fury is doing 1k. It's not that, like, huge difference, but one is probably doing, like, 5k, 6k more, which is, like, a mountain more. Like, 20k versus 13k, for example. But yeah, people place them low because you have a way better option out there. It's not like it's unplayable, you will just not be doing top deeps. Which is why we're here, we're trying to do top deeps.
Hands is no more. The Enhancement Shaman is back to using agility once again.
Yep.
They excel at short-term burst and consistent AoE fights with the ability to spread Flame Shock with Lava Lash. Combine that with the tried and true Magma Totem and Fire Nova and you'll be doing big numbers. The problem for the Enhanced Shaman is that's where the pros list kind of end. As a Shaman this expansion, you'll mostly be relegated to being a utility pick. You have a wide set of buffs that will allow the raid to be more flexible with its composition, and with the 5-second interrupt cooldown, you will be the go-to person for the kick rotations. Not to mention that while mages now can cast Time Warp, you don't want to take away a global from those pumping fire mages, and Rest of Shaman will not be that widely represented. The role of casting Lust will be yours to fill. With all that said, a good Enhancement Shaman can still do solid damage.
Yeah, they
and
can.
With later phases bringing the opportunity for some solid snapshots and gear swapping, they won't merely be buff bots. That's why they earned their spot in the B tier.
Yeah, B. There we go.
That brings us on to the Feral Druid. The Feral Druid in Cataclysm play.
I'm gonna say it right now. I will be surprised if it's not B tier at least. I can see it being A. I don't see it being S at all. I can see it being A. I would not be surprised if it's B. I would be surprised if it's less than B. Just because of how good they are baseline, first of all, like no gear requirement, but also how good they get with the gear, and the fact that Paragon used 10 of them on a progress kill.
Plays very similar to the Wrath Lich King version, but with a few minor adjustments. It'll be all about managing the uptime of your Rake, Rip, and Savage Roar while snapshotting your bleeds with Tiger's Fury.
Yep.
Savage Roar was changed to being a auto-attack modifier, thus making it less crucial to have up before you bleed. You'll also have some procs to keep the gameplay somewhat dynamic in the form of Stampede, allowing you to use Ravage without being in stealth. Once the boss gets to 25%, you'll be able to refresh your Rip through using Ferocious Bite, which
B or
makes
C?
your XP
Yeah,
phase
I'm thinking
very
B.
strong.
I can see C, but I'm thinking B.
Phase, we want to snapshot to the best of our ability in order to keep the same Rip up for the remainder of the fight. Utility-wise, you bring Stampeding Roar, which is absolutely broken on some fights,
Really
while
good.
still pulling your weight buff-wise with 5% crit, 30% bleed damage, and Sunder Armor.
I think he's judging this based on raw damage output, in which case I could see it maybe being a really high C tier, or a low B tier. But because of the utility they bring as well, to me it's a B or A tier, and the fact that they're really easy to play, they're really easy to play, low gear requirements, and you don't have to compete with certain weapons used by rogues and shit, that's pretty nice.
Now, here's the harsh reality. As a Feral Druid off-tank, you're absolutely an S tier pick. But if you aim to be a pure DPS, then Cataclysm will not be kind to you.
You sure?
Combat rest is not what it used to be after the changes in Cataclysm, and will certainly be brought by someone else in the raid group, whether you're doing 10-man or 25-man raiding. Your DPS is middle of the pack and can be strong in certain use cases, but unless you're an off-tank, then you're earning yourself a spot in the B tier.
Yes, B tier, okay. That's okay, that's okay.
Rogue, and frankly, this video is long enough without going over each.
Like, I muted instead of pausing, but like, once again, I would be surprised if it was less than B. Even though there is a part of me that could see the C tier pick, I was more of, for me it's high B or low A. But I think he's only judging it based on pure DPS, in which case it's low B. So it's fair, it's fair.
And let's speedrun these specs. Buff-wise, none of the specs brings anything that isn't brought by other popular classes. And as such, you need to do big numbers to justify a raid spot.
Yeah, right.
The Assassination Rogue does just that. With an incredibly simple playstyle of using Mutilate to build combo points, and then Venom
Assassination Rogue is pretty
Rapture,
good, to be fair.
The Assassination Rogue will pump hard from the get-go.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it plays very...
And it's really insane in Dragon Soul, by the way, especially when you get the daggers, it's like, perfect.
Similarly to how it did in Wrath, with the addition of Vendetta, and you now have an XQ phase where you swap to Backstab instead of Mutilate when the target is below 35% HP. Combat Rogue pretty much plays exactly like it did in Wrath with two major changes. In Cataclysm, you get access to Revealing Strikes, which is a combo point generating ability that empowers your next offensive finishing move, being Eviscerate or Rapture. You'll still be spamming Sinister Strike, but Revealing Strike should be used before you reach 5 combo points if you are offloading your points with a damaging spell.
Exactly.
Then there's the big one. Blade Flurry gets turned to a toggle on and off ability, meaning if you choose to, you can have it up at all times. It does come with the trade-off of having 30% less energy regeneration when it's up, but boy oh boy does the Combat Rogue pump in fights where there's a lot of cleave. Then we have the Sub-Rogue. In past expansions, the Sub-Rogue has been the go-to PvP spec, and Cataclysm doesn't necessarily change that, but that being said, they are certainly viable in a PvE setting this time around. It's one of the hardest classes in the game to play right, and if
it's
you don't
really hard to play right.
Optimally, it falls behind the other two significantly.
Yeah.
It will arguably be an S tier spec when they get access to legendary daggers in Dragon Soul, but at that point, progression is already over, so it doesn't really matter. They could still see some uses over the Asa Rogue, but will for the most part not see much play in a competitive environment. And therefore, I will place the Asa Rogue in the A tier, Combat Rogue in B tier, and Sub Rogues in C tier.
That's fair.
Now,
that's fair. I would do
levels throughout the patches will vary, and some classes will bounce up and down a tier or two depending on the phase. Further, Cataclysm is in my opinion where the balance is at its best.
I would put Subtlety into the D tier in pretty much every single raid tier except Dragon Soul. And once again, Dragon Soul, you want to have the legendary daggers, or at least really good gear, and then you can jump up the tiers based on personal playstyle, and how good you are as a person or a player.
And with buffs being consolidated, all specs are pretty much equal. Some are just more equal than others.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will enjoy the tank and healer rankings that I put out a while ago. I also have a Cataclysm playlist if you're on board that Cataclysm hype train. But that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. Until next time.
Hey, I was like, no, I clicked on the wrong thing, dude.
85 in Cataclysm, and you want to know.
Let me go back and give your video a like,
with
okay?
Tank and healer.
I feel like that video deserves a like, so I'm gonna be the 500th person to give that video a like. Once again, that is ranking WoW Cataclysm melee DPS from best to worst by Riani. We have been checking out quite a few of his videos, and he's been helpful to the channel as well, giving me a little bit of an overview on the classes for a class video series that I'm working on for Cataclysm. So he's been really helpful, and he knows a lot, he's really chill, and he's from Scandinavia as well, just like me. So 500 like. If you haven't seen the video, I'll be linking it in chat, so you can go and show some love as well. Now, I did want to check out more videos as well, but it's already 10:20, like 10:30, and we have more archaeology to do, so it's back to archaeology, and hopefully get some epics. I'm gonna get an epic today, and we have limited time to get that epic, so we have to get back and farm. Alright? Really juicy video though, I like, and I'm the 500th like on it. I'm gonna give you guys a link as well, so go and click the like 3 times. Yeah, go and click the like 3 times.